Hello, basses. We're going to talk about the Phrygian hand shape today. And this one's going to feel an awful lot like our minor hand shape. We're going to have similar things. We only have to really talk about one pivot that happens on the G string, and then the rest of it is just our normal shifting, and it's going to feel very simple. The other difference is that we want to, instead of using 4, we want to use 2 so that we're playing F naturals. On the F, that's really the only big difference that we're going to work through. So let's talk about the scale portion. We'll run it just like we did the other ones. We'll practice the scale portion. I'll give you some things to work on. We'll pause the video, allow you guys to spend some time with it on your own. And then we'll come back. We'll work through the scale in thirds. Again, I'll give you some things to practice, some things to focus on in your practice session. We'll pause. We'll let you practice for a little bit. We'll come back and we'll run the entire thing in full. So, as I said, really the first 4 notes should feel very comfortable. It's E, F natural, G, A, no big deal. This is where we start to work through some stuff. We add a pivot here. So when we're on this A right here, starting at A, we play A, B, and C all under one hand without shifting. We all do it under a pivot. So the first A is on the tape, then we pivot, so our second finger's on B, then our fourth finger is already lined up for C natural. So I want you to spend a couple minutes or a little bit of time when you practice this, just doing this pivot. Pivot. The key is to keep your thumb in place. Your thumb is kind of making sure you're in the position you want to be, and it allows you to return to that A much more consistently if our thumb stays in place. Okay, so practice that pivot. Some things, I guess, to think about is make sure you're moving with your finger on the string, and your first finger truly is like the finger that you move on. Okay, so think about moving with your first finger, and then everything lays down from there. So take a second and practice that pivot. Okay, the rest of it is then you're going to shift, meaning your thumb's moving. The whole hand comes up together. Your first finger's on D. So that's how we finish this exercise. So the scale would look like this. There's a pivot, then a shift. So take a second, pause your video, practice the pivot, then practice the shift. Pivot and shift. Go ahead and pause your video. All right, we're back. Now we're looking at our scale in thirds. Okay, the whole first section all the way until this A all happens in first position without much change. So no, not too much different than what we would be used to. So I did all those notes without moving a hand position. The only difference is I used 2 instead of 4. Okay, now we start to work a pivot in the first chunk, and then we work a shift, a paired shift. So we're at that A, we're right here on this A. This X4 means we pivot up. We're already in place for a B under second finger. Now we shift, so our fourth finger's on D. Our first finger's already in position on that C natural. Now we shift, so our first finger's on D and our fourth finger's on E. And then our first finger is already in place on the D string for that A. So starting at this A, this is what the last half of the scale in thirds looks like. Pivot, shift, shift, then first finger. So take a second, practice that pivot, then practice each of the shifts. So going from B to D, C to E. Practice the pivot and then practice each of the shifts. So I would go B, D, practicing that shift right there. Then I would practice this shift. Just so I got used to the movement of how that works. So go ahead and pause this and practice your scale in thirds. All right, we're back. Again, at any point, rewind, replay, pause, take a second, make sure you understand what I'm talking about. Maybe you have to, like, I'm a physical person sometimes. Maybe you have to pause it and try that. Okay, I understand what that pivot means, okay? But take your, manipulate this video however you need to make it work for you. Let's go ahead and play through the whole thing. half notes really slow, and I'll call out where we pivot and shift. Here we go. 1, 2, half notes and go. Second finger, first finger, pivot, shift, back to first. Here's this pivot, pivot, second. Now we shift. Now we shift. That's your Phrygian hand shape.